Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for creative people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're an artist, designer, or creative entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your own time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sunlight Podcast. Today, I am so excited to bring you the first in a 4-part series to help you deal with some really common mistakes that creative people make when it comes to their money and taxes. So today, we're going to start with receipts and bookkeeping demystified. So why you're confused, we're going to clarify everything for you. So here's a scenario to start. Picture this. Picture yourself scrambling right before a tax deadline, probably to add up receipts, maybe Googling your tax questions at the same time, and just feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to get all my stuff organized. And you're dealing with a pile of paper receipts. Maybe you have online receipts and you're like trying to fit them together and it just doesn't make any sense, right? Or maybe you've had the experience where you bring your receipts to your accountant and the accountant is like, I don't want these. And you're feeling kind of like, wait, I don't get it. Aren't these mandatory? What? Right? So what's going on? Why are receipts both totally mandatory and something that your accountant is mad about if you try to bring them to them? We're going to get to that. So what do you want here? What is the point for you? You want to feel organized. You want to feel calm and never have that stressed out panic feeling of the tax deadline coming, IRS knocking at your door, you getting in trouble, maybe even the feeling of losing focus in your business or your studio because, you're kind of derailed by an audit or, just a mess and having to research tax stuff, organize receipts, etc. Right? You are running a busy creative practice, whether you are an artist or running a creative business. You probably have 10,000 too many things to do. Your to-do list is way too long and you can barely get through it every day. You just want this part to be easier, right? So you're feeling confused. I am here to tell you what the issue is, why you're getting confused, and how to fix it. At the end of this podcast, you are going to learn 3 different systems that you need. Okay. We're going to sort them apart because when you have them all jumbled together in your head and you don't understand that there's actually 3 different things to think about and they have 3 different roles in your money. When you don't know that, it's just a jumble and a mess and you waste time on things that are irrelevant. Okay. So I'm going to teach you these 3 systems, what the differences are, how to keep them straight so you avoid wasting time and that you no longer will feel anxious, stressed, and disorganized. And we want you to start feeling really calm and organized. Okay. So let's get started. There's really 3 different issues at play when it comes to organizing your numbers, getting bookkeeping set up, and getting your sort of tax system in control. Okay. There's 3 different things that you need. There are receipts, there's tax documents, and there's bookkeeping. Okay. Now, I want you to actually pull these apart in your mind. These 3 things are all different and they should all have their own system and they play different roles. Okay. These are not treated like the same thing. They do not get lumped together, although they do overlap in certain points. And I think that's why we get confused. So what you really need is a very simple system. These things don't have to be complicated at all. Okay. I know it can feel like it, but they don't need to be. These systems can be very simple, but you need a system to organize each of these 3 categories. Okay. So first, let's talk about receipts. First of all, what are receipts for? Okay. I think people get really confused about what the role of receipts actually is in your taxes. Here's the story. Receipts are proof. Okay. They are your proof that a thing happened, that an expense you put on your tax return as a deduction really happened, it's the proof that you didn't make it up, right? So a generally good practice is only put things on your tax return as a deduction that you have a receipt for. In other words, anything on your tax return, the IRS can come back and say, hey, we'd like you to prove it. And so you shouldn't put it on your tax return if you can't prove it. Okay. Now, not every single thing you're going to spend money for and deduct in your business is going to have a straightforward, simple receipt. And there are some systems that you need in your bookkeeping to manage those particular categories. But anything that has a receipt, right, that does have something straightforward, your supplies is a really good example. Typically, a supply, you're going to buy from a supplier and you get a receipt for that purchase. So those receipts, you just need to save them. Do you need to be sorting receipts? No. Do you need to be tallying up your receipts? No, you don't. You do need to track your numbers in your business, but receipts are not the best way to do that. So that shouldn't, if you are doing your bookkeeping off of your receipts, your system is too complicated and you are wasting time. Okay. Here's what I have to say about receipts, just to clarify a little bit further. So what I mean when I say the IRS could ask you for them at any time, that is true. Audits are the only check and balance that we have in our tax system. And if you think about it, if you were filing a Schedule C, if you were a business, actually, if you're filing an 1120S, if you have an S Corp or a partnership too, this is also relevant. But you are stating to the IRS every year and to your state, I had these deductible expenses in my business, right? And pretty much every year, you're putting that on the tax return and the IRS, and you are not submitting any proof that it's true. Think about the contrast, right? A person with a day job, a person who's an employee who has a W-2, they get a copy of their W-2. That is a tax document. And the IRS gets sent a copy as well, right? So you put the information from your W-2 onto your tax return. And the funny thing is the IRS already has a copy of it. And so when your tax document comes into the IRS, they just match those two numbers inside the IRS system, inside their computers. And so long as the numbers that you report and the numbers on the W-2 that the IRS already has match, there's nothing to check up on, right? We have built-in third-party verification, okay? With receipts in your business, you're basically saying, trust me, every single year, right? So, okay, we know you're honest, but let's just take a look at every single business across the entire United States for a second. Do you think that absolutely every business owner, especially small business owners who maybe just don't even know the rules, do you think every single one of them is reporting correctly and doing everything right every single year? Probably not, right? I do think we all do the best we can, but there are some people getting away with stuff, right? And so that is why the IRS has the right any given tax year to send you a letter that says, hey, this year we'd like to take a look. Okay. And if that happens, it doesn't mean you're caught doing something terrible. It doesn't. It's just saying, hey, this is the time, you got picked. It's like jury duty. Hey, you got picked. You got to prove it. Okay. So this is why it's a very good policy not to put stuff on your tax return that you can't back up with proof. Okay. So the role of receipts is basically you just need to pull them out up to 6 years later if the IRS sends you such a letter. Okay. That's why you need them. So you are just pulling them out and you're, photocopying them, writing a letter of response, and you send them in the receipts, generally only in the categories they're asking for. Occasionally they'll ask for everything from a tax year from your business. That's a real pain in the butt, but it can happen. In my program, I teach a simple system for organizing your receipts. And what I like to teach is a way to keep them in chronological order and a certain kind of separation that makes a lot of sense, which is keeping them by year. That's very important. Why do we do that? We do that because audits happen by year. You don't want to have to go fishing back through 10 years of receipts in a shoebox to find only the receipts from tax year 2021. it is actually very important to just at least keep them organized by year. And I recommend keeping them chronological because then you can find anyone that you need, right? If you actually needed to find it. But other than that, you don't need to waste time on receipts. You just need to keep them. You need to have them. They go into storage. They go into storage for 7 years. Okay. So I have a system that I teach in my program that takes 15 minutes to implement, maybe less, where you can have your receipt system kind of set up forever, right? Think about that. That's pretty nice, right? 15 minutes of your time so that you never again in your entire life have to sort receipts and you always have the backup that you need in case you're audited. Okay, that's number one, your receipt system and the role of receipts. What's next? Tax documents. Okay, the second thing you need to know about is your tax documents. Now, you're probably familiar with these. These are things that come in like your W-2, your 1099s, and if you're working for yourself, you're probably making some money on 1099s, but you might not. Maybe you just bill clients, so you don't actually get 1099s from them. But your tax documents, I'm talking about those official documents that come in the mail or into your inbox, and they say, for official tax use, tax documents enclosed, they're usually identifiable. You need a system to never miss one of those, right? It's very important. A missing tax document is going to cause you a headache in your taxes. So you never want to miss one. And it's good to know who owes you them, right? When it comes to 1099s, it's a good idea to know who is likely to be sending you one and to verify with them so that you don't accidentally have a mismatch in your reporting, okay? So your tax documents are one important element of getting your taxes organized, okay? And again, in my program, I teach a different system, very simple, takes about 10 minutes to set up for simply tracking the documents that come in so that you have them organized for the year, right? This is really just a once a year thing that you need to do pretty much around January. Part 3, next thing, bookkeeping. This one's the big one, okay? Bookkeeping is the third system that you need. Now, bookkeeping is a little more complex, okay? But many people confuse bookkeeping, tax documents, and receipts, and actually you want to keep those ideas separate in your mind. So bookkeeping is super important. And when you are self-employed, when you have a side hustle, when you have self-employment income, when you work for yourself, bookkeeping is critical and pretty much mandatory because you are going to need to report your income on a Schedule C, and it is your legal obligation to track and report all of your income. Hey, I'm interrupting this episode of the Sunlight Podcast to tell you about a class that I'm giving that's free to help you organize for taxes and grow that giant pile of FU money. It'll help you understand your taxes and fortify your business. I'm going to talk about the mistakes that every creative person makes when it comes to their business. And I'm going to talk about some steps in the framework that I use in my programs that will help you get yourself organized, understand your situation better, and get your head right about growing a pile of fuck you money. It comes in the packaging of a very creative, friendly space. It's a safe space with no jargon. I make no assumptions about you having any financial knowledge beforehand. So you can just come as you are, feel safe, and learn what you want to learn. Register for the class. It's free at go.sunlighttax.com/register. Now, the cool part, though, when you're self-employed is that you also get the benefit of taking expenses out of your taxable income. Now, you don't have to do that. That's not mandatory that you take deductions. In fact, if you don't want to bother with bookkeeping, you actually don't need to track your deductions. You can just go ahead and pay tax on a much higher number of income and pay tax on all the income you bring in without subtracting expenses. Okay? So if you're feeling like I don't want to bother with bookkeeping, I'm here to say you don't need to because you don't actually need to deduct any expenses. But I think it's a great idea. I think you should. I think of bookkeeping as self-care because It allows you to take advantage of these wonderful pieces of the tax code that say you don't have to pay tax on the whole amount. We are actually going to subsidize your expenses in your business to help you make more purchases and grow and expand your business. So it's a really good thing. It's beneficial to you to track them, to take advantage of the tax benefit of your deductions. Now, what is the obligation in order to get those deductions? You have to track them, okay? If you're going to take deductions, you have to track them. That is your legal obligation if you're going to do it. So receipts are necessary in this world because those are your proof. Remember, those go into your files. You save them. That's deep storage. But the bookkeeping, this is different. Bookkeeping is the tracking. Bookkeeping is you watching all the numbers. Bookkeeping is actually, I like to say that bookkeeping is War and Peace, whereas your tax return is the Cliff Notes. Okay, I'm going to explain that a little more. Bookkeeping plays a role in your taxes. You will give basically a summary of your bookkeeping on your Schedule C. You will do the Cliff Note version. You will just give one number for each of your tax categories. So it's just the highlights, right? It's the highlights. And it's very important that you have a very complete, robust set of books so that you don't miss anything, right? You don't miss deductions you're entitled to. Bookkeeping actually expands beyond simply reporting numbers for your taxes. So at a minimum, everybody needs bookkeeping to do their taxes. But once your business is a little more, I think most people need bookkeeping generally for larger reasons than just taxes. You need bookkeeping so you know what's going on in your business. So you see the numbers for yourself. So you come to know how high your expenses are month over month, how profitable this line of product is versus this line, or this service versus this service, right? Bookkeeping is actually a really wonderful and powerful tool for decision-making in your business. It's something you really want on a broader level than just for taxes. But one of the roles that you have it for is to do your taxes, okay? Now, so the important thing for you to understand is that your bookkeeping should track absolutely everything. That's why I say bookkeeping is War and Peace, right? Bookkeeping is the grand novel. It has every nuance, every detail, every little thing that ever happened should be in there. Whereas your taxes, when you summarize the numbers, you're just going to put little summaries, right? And so the IRS does have a right, if they have questions about your tax return, and I think as we've touched on, they can ask you questions. That's fair. And they can ask for you to show them your books. Okay. So you can be compelled by the IRS to show your books. You should be aware that that's true. But in general, year to year, the books basically exist just for you, for your edification, for your decision-making, for your tracking. Every single thing that's in your books does not have to go in your taxes. Okay. Now, you absolutely do have to report all your income. That is mandatory. That is your legal obligation. We're not skipping that. But you don't have to take every single deduction. And there's a lot of places in the tax code where you get to take a certain deduction either this way or this way. And so there's a lot of places where you actually want to track multiple things for a single category so that you can make decisions when it gets to tax time about which is the bigger deduction, right? So there's some tricks that good bookkeeping has that will actually simplify your life when it comes to tax time, because they will show you, oh, okay, your mileage deduction is bigger when you do it this way than when you do it this way. Or your meals deduction is bigger when you do it this way versus this way, right? So there's a lot of decision points on your tax return that can come from information we hope you've been tracking in your books. Now, most bookkeepers aren't tax experts. So a lot of times you will learn bookkeeping or set up bookkeeping, and you will have to recalculate things because the person who set up your books or the person you learn bookkeeping from doesn't know tax law. So they're not really super concerned about tracking this way versus this way. I personally, because I'm a tax professional, because I use people's books on the regular in order to do a tax return, I'm actually hyper concerned about tracking, this one category in 2 different ways and this one in 2 different ways, and having this formula built into the system so that you could see which one is bigger every year without recalculating. So my system that I teach in my program is based on that. And so it's really important to me because I think it's, a lot of us end up having to redo huge columns of numbers over and over to, see if our deduction is bigger one way versus the other. I love not recalculating. I love just knowing from a glance which one is better so that you're always getting the bigger deduction. So that is how I teach bookkeeping. That's my particular bias and orientation. A really good question here, I think, is, does bookkeeping need to be complicated? It can be. It certainly can be. And if your business is complicated, your books should reflect your business, right? They should reflect the degree of complexity of your business. Your book should have everything, even if ultimately not every piece of what's on the books is going to go onto the tax return. You're not obligated to take every deduction you're entitled to. And there's some choice parts on your tax return, whether you're going to depreciate an item over the life of the item or whether you're going to take a Section 179 expense and get to expense the whole thing in 1 year. These are some game time decisions you might make with your bookkeeping, but you can't make decisions if you don't have the information in the first place. Okay, so does bookkeeping need to be complicated? So like I said, if you have a pretty simple, straightforward business, then your books don't have to be complicated. They can be simple and straightforward too. So of course, as your business grows, if you have employees, if you're administering a 401k plan, blah, 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 you're going to need software, right? There's no question that at a certain level of interaction, daily transactions, lots and lots of sales, like high volume, you need software to work with, to do your bookkeeping. And that's fine. I do that. My business is too complicated to do with a spreadsheet. But I will say that there is a certain segment of people, of creative people, who are either working a side hustle. So it has to have a profit motive. That's key because it's not a business if you don't have a profit motive. But if it is a side hustle, or if it is just a simpler, smaller scale of business, then you can actually use a spreadsheet for your books. You don't actually need to be paying monthly cost for software. So who fits in this category really well? Somebody like a teaching artist, right? A lot of people have a day job, teaching at a university, but they will also have an independent, self-employed creative practice that is their own artwork, right? So you might teach painting at a university, but then you also have shows and you exhibit and you sell your paintings, right? Then that is going to be Schedule C income. And you do need bookkeeping to track that self-employed component, that independent practice. And that is the perfect person to be using just a simple spreadsheet. So the system that I built, I did build a spreadsheet bookkeeping system. I call it No Fear Taxes. But the reason that I built this system is because there are these people like that, like a teaching artist, like a person with a side hustle or a baby business, where you don't need the expense of monthly bookkeeping software, but you need to do some basic tracking of your books for pretty much for taxes, right? Maybe you're paying quarterly taxes, and so you need to make that calculation. And I have a formula inside my spreadsheet that helps you determine what that payment should be each quarter. But you don't need anything more complicated than that, right? So the way that I built my spreadsheet, and I will tell you how to build it on your own if you don't want to pay money and you feel like you're willing to put in a lot of time and effort on this, you can download my free deductions guide, sunlighttax.com/deductions guide. And what I did with my spreadsheet system is I basically mapped the tax categories onto the spreadsheet, right? So that what you're tracking is not some dumb default that's meant to be generic and applicable to any US business that QuickBooks is going to give you or whatever software you use, but I'm actually mapping it to the categories you are going to use as a creative person and exactly where they translate into on your Schedule C. On the tax document, you will ultimately have to use this to report on, right? To me, that is the most logical, straightforward, simple way to build this system so that you are just tracking exactly the thing you need for the taxes, right? So that's why I built my system that way. You could actually build this yourself if you download my guide and you get out your own Google spreadsheet and go for it. You have my blessing. Mine is more robust. It's got multiple tabs and it tracks the other less straightforward things. So it tracks mileage, it tracks per diem meals expense, travel, home office, which is a tricky one. So it also tracks and has formulas in there to help you calculate the deduction for those kind of harder elements. And another thing that I do in my sheet, because, as a tax professional, I really care about teaching people what goes in what category, what goes where, how to do it. So mine has notes in every single category heading that says, this is what goes in this category. This is what goes in this category. So, plus I also put some formulas in there about retirement accounts, picking one that's good for you. There's a little formula to calculate which retirement account you'll get the better deduction out of. There's a formula in there to calculate an approximate estimated quarterly tax payment for you per quarter, and a place to report what you actually paid. So I have little tricks. I have like a summary page where all the formulas pull to so that you can kind of see one big number with all the different tabs combined. And I'm really proud of that. I worked really hard on it. That's the spreadsheet system I teach within my program. But I also teach a broader system. And I want you to be aware, if you're listening now, you may never join my program, but just to understand, I think it's really important to understand kind of the why behind bookkeeping, what role it actually plays for you in your life, to know, like, am I just doing bookkeeping so I can pay my taxes correctly? Or am I doing bookkeeping for larger, like, business making decisions, right? Generally, if your answer is just for tax, the spreadsheet system is going to often work for you. If your bookkeeping is for larger, like, business decisions and nuance, you probably need software. And I like to teach kind of the why and the ins and outs and the different categories that are applicable to everyone, including people who use software, because it's just good to know the reasons behind why you're tracking certain things and what you might need to pull out at tax time versus what are things that you want to know but aren't going to actually even go on your taxes. So I hope that clarifies for you kind of the role of bookkeeping and like why you do it. And if you need software that you're going to pay for monthly, and that's fine. Like I use software at this point because, I have employees and contractors and a 401k plan that I administer. My taxes are now pretty complicated, but yours might be simple. If you're a painter and you sell, 10 paintings a year and you're also a teaching artist, you probably just need a spreadsheet. So I hope that's been really helpful, just so that you understand that there are ways that you can set up your bookkeeping, whether you use a simple spreadsheet system, whether you want to go today and build your own, or whether you want to join my program and get mine, or whether you use software, that you don't need to use the default categories that your software gives you. And that mapping your bookkeeping to your taxes is very helpful because it saves you the headache of recalculating your numbers every year at tax time. It just saves you a ton of time and it gets you more money. You always know you're getting the biggest deduction you can. And I just think having visibility into that, quick visibility into how much money you're saving and how much you owe in taxes is really wonderful. There's no mystery and no recalculating. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. To recap, the 3 systems that you need that all are slightly different, you need a receipt tracking system. Receipts are there for proof. They go in your files, they go in storage. You do not need to be counting them up and storing them. You should not be doing your bookkeeping off of receipts. That is a waste of your time and a very easy way to miss stuff. You need a tax document system. So you just need a simple collection system so that you never miss a tax document. And remember that you have physical ones coming in your mail, and you also have, in these days, electronic ones that will come in your inbox. And third, and finally, the big one, you need a bookkeeping system. So your bookkeeping system does not need to be complicated. It can be very simple, but it, in my humble opinion, my actually totally biased opinion, I think your bookkeeping system really ought to map to your taxes, since most of you are using bookkeeping ultimately to figure out how much you owe in quarterly tax payments, in annual tax payments, and to make tax decisions. Now, bookkeeping can expand outward and also include other elements, right? That you might make decisions about your business, and that's wonderful and awesome. But I think at its core, every single person is going to need to be paying taxes. And so setting up your bookkeeping from go in a way that makes your taxes really easy is just smart. It just saves you a lot of time and a lot of headache. If you are that DIY person and you want to kind of like figure this out, you are so welcome to do that. I absolutely applaud you. The deductions guide that I offer for free is on my website, sunlighttax.com/deductions guide. I actually have 6 different versions of it, and you can just click on the one that is most appropriate to you. The reason I have 6 different guides is because sometimes, some creative people have slightly different tax needs or questions than others. For example, if you're a maker, you might want to know the rules about cost of goods sold. Those are on the Maker's Guide. If you are an online business owner, you might want to know about things like coaching or like business conferences. And so that specific detail happens to be on the online business guide one. If you're a performer, maybe you want to know about rules about like costumes or personal appearance. So those guides have little shades of difference. Essentially they're very similar, but they have little shades of difference for the different creative fields, since we do have different concerns. So I hope that's helpful to you. Anybody is welcome to go download that visual guide. It's a 1-page PDF guide that you can just print out. I update it every single year with the new tax rules. Go to sunlighttax.com/deductions guide to get that. And if you want to set up your own spreadsheet system using that guide as a basis, you are so welcome to do it. Or if you want to benefit from the work I have already done on that, of course, that spreadsheet system is available inside my program. Okay, so I hope you will stay tuned. I have more in this series. I have 3 more of these clarification series to teach you things that you want to know because they feel really confusing. And I want to teach you about mistakes I see doing the taxes of creative people and how you can avoid them. So I also want to let you know that coming soon, I have an exciting announcement for you. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming series. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye. Hey, I'm interrupting this episode of the Sunlight Podcast to tell you about a class that I'm giving that's free to help you organize for taxes and grow that giant pile of FU money. It'll help you understand your taxes and fortify your business. I'm going to talk about the mistakes that every creative person makes when it comes to their business. And I'm going to talk about some steps in the framework that I use in my programs that will help you get yourself organized, understand your situation better, and get your head right about growing a pile of fuck you money. It comes in the packaging of a very creative, friendly space. It's a safe space with no jargon. I make no assumptions about you having any financial knowledge beforehand. So you can just come as you are, feel safe, and learn what you want to learn. Register for the class. It's free at go.sunlighttax.com/register. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.